Hello, and thank you for tuning in. Today's webinar is entitled Back to Business, How Employers Can Empower Women and Moms in the Workplace Post-COVID. This event is presented by Healthy Horizons, whose mission it is to empower breastfeeding parents at work and at home. Healthy Horizons is the first company to offer comprehensive lactation at work benefits at scale across North America. Today, we have an opportunity to hear from three insightful leaders who are helping employers to empower their women in the workplace. Sheila Dukas-Janikos, right below me here on the screen, is CEO and co-founder of Healthy Horizons Corporate Lactation Programs and Breastfeeding Centers. A little bit about Sheila. She was discouraged by her doctor from breastfeeding during her first pregnancy. And then she lacked support during her second pregnancy from her employer. And so due to those experiences, she was determined to help new mothers achieve their breastfeeding goals. Healthy Horizons was born 30 years ago, celebrating their 30th anniversary this year, out of a desire to provide information and counseling to women on nutrition, human sexuality, health, and general breastfeeding support. Today, Healthy Horizons lactation rooms are found in Fortune 500 companies and top workplaces in over 100 cities throughout North America, and the breastfeeding centers have supported more than 100,000 families. One of her clients is Carta, and we have with us Mita Malik, who is the head of diversity and inclusion at Carta. Mita is a corporate change maker with a track record of transforming business. She gives innovative ideas a voice, and serves customers and communities with purpose. She is, as mentioned, the head of inclusion, equity, and impact at Carta, and formerly was the head of inclusion and cross-cultural marketing at Unilever. Mita Malik is a LinkedIn top voice and a contributor for Entrepreneur. Her writing's been published in Harvard Business Review as well. In addition, New York Post and Business Insiders have carried her work. And at the bottom of our screen, we have Aura Nelson. Aura is a senior manager of consumer insights at Wolverine Worldwide and a mom of 2 young children. When she isn't juggling remote kindergarten and toddler nap times, she demonstrates subject matter expertise in the outdoor industry and is the lead COVID researcher at Wolverine Worldwide. As part of her work, she is working to understand COVID's impact on consumers. She recently completed a deep dive exploration into how women are feeling, coping, and behaving during the pandemic. This work has uncovered some rich insights related to the challenges women face at work during a pandemic, the expectations they have of employers, and how they view the post-pandemic future of work. We look forward to a really interactive discussion with these women on this important topic. It's going to be really insightful and honest, and we're so glad that you can be here with us. For our live listeners, we encourage you to ask questions during our presentation today using the comments feature either on Facebook or YouTube, depending on the platform that you're listening. We'll try to take questions live at the end of our broadcast. And if you're listening to the recorded event, feel free to add your comments as well. We'll be interacting with those comments after the event too. All right, so now that I've done my intros, I want to go around the table here and have each of you have a chance to speak a little bit yourself and tell us some of your background. So Sheila, can we start with you and maybe tell us a little bit about why you decided to go into the lactation business?
Absolutely. Well, part of it was my own experiences, as you were saying earlier, with lack of support. Society in general wasn't supporting moms who were going back to work. Even though the books on breastfeeding, when you got to the chapter of working and breastfeeding, it basically said, don't do it. So that was not helpful. It was really uncharted territory. And when I went back the first time, it was like a fish out of water. I didn't know where to pump, how to do it, how to store my milk. There wasn't even good equipment. And that was really the genesis of wanting to be able to go and educate employers and, the moms and parents I was working with. I did become a lactation consultant at that point and finished my master's in public health education and started developing curriculum around that because I knew that we needed to get that information out of there. And so that was how it initially started. And then from there, it just exploded basically because there was the need and nobody was looking at that. And this was 30 years ago.
That's great. Ora, let me pass the ball to you. We actually got connected when you reached out to Healthy Horizons as a part of the work that we described where you were researching COVID and its impact on women and moms in the workplace. Can you dig a little bit more into that project and what that's been like for you to study that?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. One of my key responsibilities at Wolverine Worldwide over the past year plus has been to lead COVID research, as you mentioned. So last year, we tracked a group of consumers over the course of the year, a longitudinal study, and we really wanted to understand behaviors and emotions around COVID. And this year we shifted that. So now we're doing deep dive topics, and our first topic this spring was on women. We started with 800 women who applied and gleaned some high-level insights from them. And then we did a deep dive with 75 women, and we gathered hundreds of text entries, hundreds of photos and videos, and we really got a glimpse of what was going on in their lives. And from this, we found some really strong themes, and it was a multinational study, but we found some strong themes that really emerged that really spoke to us about what was going on with women at home and at work. So thank you for having me. And I'm just super excited to share their stories.
Yeah, we were so impressed when we heard you kind of talking about what you had learned about the just compassionate approach that you had to really understanding what women were feeling and going through and how to help them cope. So I'm excited to have our audience hear more about that. Amita, tell us a little bit about you and your work. And I know you're a top LinkedIn voice, and you're so passionate for the voice of people whose voices maybe are lesser heard. And so tell us a little bit about you and your work.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am the proud daughter of Indian immigrant parents. I was born and raised in the US outside of Boston. My younger brother and I, we were just a handful of families of color. And I was pretty much made to know, my peers made it clear that every day I did not belong in that community. And I was bullied a lot growing up. And so I also didn't grow up in an Instagram era. I didn't feel like I was being represented by brands, products, and services. And so if you know that about me, it's no surprise that I'm a passionate storyteller, and I went into marketing for many years and transitioned into the diversity and equity and inclusion space because exactly to what you said, I don't want anyone to ever feel like they don't belong or that they are excluded. And so that's my life's work. And not just for myself, but for my children and all of my children. I have joked earlier, an 8-year-old going on 18 and a 6-year-old going on 16, which has only been exacerbated in this pandemic. So it's about me.
So wonderful. I'm so proud to have the chance to host all of these women together and to hear from each of you. And so we have a couple of rounds of sort of formal questions that what I want to do is kind of pass the ball around our table here and have each of you share your insights. And then as we go, if we get any questions from the audience, we'll kind of go with the flow here. But the first topic that I really want to dig into is really how are women doing right now? And if we're looking at women in general, we want to understand that, but we also want to drill down to how are moms doing? How are we coping and adapting? And Ora, let me have you take the microphone first and talk a little bit about what you've seen.
Sure, thanks. And this was something that really, this is a topic that really stands out in our research. So, when I do research, I really try to understand emotionally what's going on with consumers. I think, in order to understand their unmet needs and emotions, we really have to understand emotionally what's going on. And I also like to share their actual quotes as much as possible so we can hear from the voice of the consumer. So I'll start out with a quote. And this is from Nasli. She's a mom of 3. And she said, you can only load a donkey's back so much before it breaks when we asked her how she was doing. And she just described a day in the life. She had 2 kids who were doing remote schooling. She had a toddler. And she talked about eating leftover crust from her kids' plates, throwing another load of laundry in. She's just absolutely exhausted. And this is something that we heard over and over and over from women. So emotionally, they're dealing with burnout. They're dealing with, just a strong sense of uncertainty. They're dealing with fear and anxiety. And, it's just all resulting in really a crisis for a lot of women. We heard from our study that 89% of the women who responded said that they were extremely or somewhat burned out, and their overall satisfaction and well-being has just absolutely declined during the pandemic. So burnout was a really strong theme that we really focused on in our research. So I'd love to pass it over to Sheila. Sheila, what are you seeing with the moms that you connect with?
Well, you touched on so many of the things. I'm seeing a lot of anxiety, just with the unknown and what it's going to be like to transition back to work, having a baby and how they're going to manage that. Some of my clients are first-time parents, and some have children that they're homeschooling and have the newborn, and are just, now that the kids are transitioning back to school, they're thinking about, am I going to be putting my child in daycare? And the stress around that seems to be pretty big. The one silver lining that I'm seeing with some of the parents is that a lot of the parents are really valuing the time they've had home with these new babies that they may not have had as much if it wasn't during a pandemic. So that's like the one piece of positivity that I could glean from this. But I mean, overall, I think it's just uncharted territory for people.
Nita, what would you add? What's been your experience with yourself, as a woman in a pandemic, and with what you've seen through your role as head of diversity and inclusion in your organization?
I think exactly echoing what you all just said. There's grief and hope. And those two things are coexisting. I think what's really, from a workplace perspective, really just unsettling and absolutely devastating is knowing that 5 million women have lost their jobs since the start of the pandemic. Over 2 million have disappeared completely from the workforce. And then as we drill down to working parents, we know that for every working father that's lost his job, 3 working mothers have lost their job. And so the question is it seems like things are starting to reopen up. Of course, we're now sitting in a US perspective. If you're thinking about India, Brazil, or Carta, which is a global financial services company, it's not the case. You are seeing the inequities of the pandemic. And so I think that's almost another panel for another time. But from the American US context, as things are opening up, the question is, how are we going to be able to get women back to work? And I think to the point you made earlier about childcare, Care.com recently did a study that talked about childcare centers are not opening up and daycare centers as fast as we would like. And many of them have shut down. So there's a supply demand issue. And then there's also an issue with just the labor shortage and making sure that you can have staff that's there consistently and regularly and who are being paid fairly. And so I think those are some of the themes that I've been seeing and some of the things that are really top of mind for me. In particular, just I'm sure as you all have experienced, having incredibly talented girlfriends shut down incredible businesses, women not having a choice and leaving because they didn't have a choice to put their families first. That was the choice, or their employer downsizing and having to leave. And so I think the question is, how are we helping all those women get back into the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think, leads us right into the next question, which is, how are women and people adapting to all of these changes with respect to their own families, with respect to the way that they approach their work? What changes are being made? Or I'm going to have you take that first too and shed some light based on what you've seen in your research.
Sure, thanks. I'll start out with women at home and talk about that experience. So, we know that the issue of women having more work at home really predates the pandemic. So there's nothing new there. But during the pandemic, the issue is just absolutely exacerbated. I will say, we all know families where the male spouse does more than the female spouse. But in general, we know it to be true that women typically do more unpaid labor at home. And during the pandemic, that increased 153%, and which is absolutely, shocking. And in our study specifically, we heard that regardless of if the woman was a working mother or if they, if they were a homemaker, they were doing a disproportionate share of the childcare and housework. So in our study, 81% of the women were saying that, the women said that they did 81% of the housework and 78% of the childcare. And, it's not just our study. We're seeing WGSN talked about women doing double shifts, not just the double shift anymore. They're saying it all adds up between working outside of the home and working in the home to 111 hours of work per week. And it's just too much. And then on top of the actual physical labor of, housework and child rearing, we know that moms also just have this extra mental load that they're carrying. I just listened to a podcast from Glennon Doyle on overwhelm yesterday. She has a podcast called We Can Do Hard Things. And she and her sister talked about the CNN ticker that's always going, always running in a mom's head. And so on top of that normal ticker that's always thinking about what the kids need, what the household needs, what we need to do for work, groceries, etc. During the pandemic, we've added COVID safety gatekeeper, virtual teacher, events coordinator, family therapist, all these extra things to that ticker. And it's just, led to women coming to this point of, almost feeling like they're going to break at times. And, I know Mita mentioned women in the workforce. We definitely heard from women in our study that they're having a hard time juggling it all and feeling like they're doing well at everything. So higher stress, higher levels of burnout, and it's really impacting them, both at home and at work. So Mita, I'll pass it back to you to see if you have anything to add from what you shared before.
Yeah, I'll echo what you said. I'm ready to resign as the chief entertainment officer in my household. And I'm entering a second summer of being failing at summer camp counseling. I think that's also something that I think many parents, at least I'm struggling with as a mom. Do I put my kids in camp or not? They're not vaccinated. I think it's another summer where we'll see, people unsure about what to do. Like, just as we all talked about earlier, just a lot of uncertainty this summer. And I would add to that, I think, personally, I feel like, my husband and I, well, he's in the other room, he might hear this, but we're both working incredibly hard. And I think I tend to fall into some of the cultural norms and stereotypes of what I've been raised, of what I'm expected to do. I think your CNN ticker is spot on, of constantly just doing more and more and more without asking for help. And so I think that's critical. I also have been, at least personally, really pleased about how employers are showing up, whether that's, I've been very bold on my calendar to put kids are napping here, lunchtime is here, this is dinner time. Not apologizing. I think we've all stopped doing that if our kids are running in or we see someone else's kids. And I think just this notion of really trying to be empathetic and show up and meet people where they are, because we don't know what kind of grief and pain people have been going through behind the screens. And so I think I've been really happy how people have been showing up for each other, especially working parents.
Yeah, I just want to read this comment that's come in from one of our listeners that just talks to exactly what both of you were saying. It was just too much to work full time be 3 months postpartum. And at 7.5 months postpartum, she had to take FMLA to take care of her baby who was learning to crawl and getting into everything. And it's, what you're talking about is, women are feeling it. Sheila, what would you add to this conversation about changes that are taking place within the family? Are any husbands kind of stepping up to the plate?
Well, we are, in our business, we are seeing more, partners asking, for the lactation support and trying to help out their partners a little bit more than before, which is really nice to see that extra help. But, our clients are telling us that they're feeling this burden, that everything really is falling on them, especially with the pressure to be able to be the best mom you could be. And if they're breastfeeding, be able to figure out those breastfeeding times and in between Zoom meetings and everything. And I love what Vita said about putting things on the calendar. And that's brilliant. Like, just put it out there. And so people can see that, you have needs too, that you're trying to make it all work. I just think it's hard. Many of the families that we're working with tell me that they're working in shifts, that the child care or the baby care is kind of being divvied up so they could work in chunks. And I that's got to be super stressful to figure that all out. But I have to commend people for being able to do that. I've watched it with our own family. I don't have young children, but I have young grandchildren. And I've tried to step in and care for those in between Zoom meetings. And they've run through and interrupted. And the 2-year-old has had tantrums during meetings. And people seem to get it. And I don't apologize either. It's just this like life. And I wish I could do more for my kids and my grandkids, but I know that I'm also working. So I think the more we could have family support, and even if you think your grandkids or your niece and nephew, like they are all taken care of, I mean, really offer to step up if you can. I think this is the time where we need to be a community and really look at what the needs are, because sometimes women and parents won't ask for help even if they need it, because they feel that burden that they need to be able to do it all on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of moving into the next question, which is maybe a piggyback off of a similar question, but what advancements, if any, and what setbacks have women experienced since the pandemic? And Mita, let me have you take that first. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about the stats. We're actually at 1980s gender workforce participation. Let that sit in. 1980s. And so I think we have to think a little bit about real ways that we're going to get women back into the workforce. I think one of the things that is really concerning to me is what I'll call the pandemic gap resume. And so we know that when you have a gap on your resume, you're 45% less likely to get a call back for an interview. And so really training recruiters and hiring managers on, let's just forget the last 15 months. Let's talk about actually what you did before that and all the skills, as we talk about chief entertainment officer, chief chef, all the things that women are juggling in the household. And I love that LinkedIn recently just added the capability of putting stay-at-home mom and stay-at-home dad. So to really celebrate that and not hide that. I also think many companies are doing returnship programs, really scaling those. A returnship is really, I'll give you an example. My good friend Katie Burke is the chief HR officer at HubSpot, and they have a returnship program where you're hired for 20 weeks. And you're doing the job for 20 weeks, sort of like but full time. And then at the end of that, you're trained and you get the opportunity to work full time based on what your skills are in demand. And I think many companies are doing this. So I think we have to have much more practical ways of thinking of how we're going to be bringing women back to work and the systemic bias they'll face from having taken time off.
Absolutely. Sheila, what would you add to that in terms of advancements and setbacks? Are there any silver linings to look at here?
The only silver lining is the ability to spend more time with your children. I mean, I think that's like, that's it. Maybe the ability to have a little bit, maybe more flexibility about not having to work in the office full time. A lot of parents have expressed that they like that idea and that they could, work from home and maybe take their child to a doctor's appointment and maybe do something for themselves if they needed to in between the work that maybe they couldn't have done in the past. So I think that's really the only positivity that I am hearing from people. I have plenty of clients who are telling me they're not going back because they can't right now. And so I love the idea of LinkedIn having that ability because it shows that you're not slacking. You're actually working harder than you probably ever worked before, right? And we're acknowledging that. So thank you for sharing that with me. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aura, I hope you don't mind if I throw you a little bit of a curveball, but as I'm kind of hearing Sheila and Mita talk a little bit about changes that are taking place, one of the things that resonates with me is what Sheila was talking about is, your kids are running around in the background and you're, dealing with all these other home life. There's like a collision of professional and personal. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? What do your research participants say about that? What do you say about it?
It depends on how disastrous, I've had presentations for a global marketing group with a child sitting on my lap, and I think one thing, and, speaking of silver linings, that has really taught me, oh my goodness, like, I don't think I've ever had to deal, normally you have to deal when you're giving a presentation with just focusing on the room in front of you and making eye contact and kind of like focusing on what a typical presentation is. Things like that have really taught me that I can stay really calm under pressure. I can be very patient. I've learned how, like these negotiating skills that I've had to develop, the creativity that I've had to come up with, for one especially important presentation, I put chocolate coins on the stairs as a distraction for my children as they went up, because I thought they're going to grab this and go and sneak away and eat this. Luckily, they never even got to the stairwell to find it. But, it's just kind of these funny things that, I've really learned how to just kind of roll with it in a whole new way. And it's really made me think also just about how valuable women are at work too, and just how much, what a great asset it is that we can truly juggle so much emotionally. Like, I think that speaks a lot to emotional intelligence and our ability to manage so much. I think that this has really proven, just how amazing women are at home and at work.
Yeah. One thing I've observed is just that you come to be okay with yourself as a whole person because you have to. And it's been almost joyful to me to experience the whole persons of my colleagues, sides of them that I didn't know about. And in a way, that's been a silver lining for me. I've enjoyed that a lot. One of the other things I really want to talk about, because I think everyone wants to know this, and we want to know from 3 women who are doing amazing things in the workplace and at home. What advice do you have? How can we do our best to balance all of this that's on our plates? And Sheila, I'm gonna have you start with that one.
So as a mom from the 80s, back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, I could tell you that was how we were programmed. And it's not a healthy way to think that you could have it all and you could balance it all. That's where we got into trouble. That's why people either didn't breastfeed or they breastfed for 6 weeks because they were trying to go back to work full time and then be a full-time parent, take care of the house, everything else. And it just was a disaster. It was an experiment that didn't end well. And I think that women today they're smarter than we were. I mean, they're not going to take it. And I think they're not going to try and balance it all. And I think that figuring out what works for you and then trying to find the situation that fits that is what I'm hearing from people. It's much healthier. Like maybe they're going to work part-time, or they're going to look for a job that does flex hours, and they're going to try to figure out childcare that works with a schedule that feels good for them. And they're not going to maybe do all the housework. They're going to maybe make their partner do it, or maybe have somebody come in and help. And same thing with meals. I think that it's the balancing it all and having it all is too much to ask for anybody to do. Why? It's not worth it, right? So I'm sure Aura has a lot to say about that.
Personally, or no? Just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I think, when it comes to balancing it all, like we have come to this point where the burden has become too great, right? And I listening to books when I'm walking, and I was listening to Michelle Obama's book Becoming, and she was talking about her fertility journey, but she said the acute burden of being female, and I put that in our report because I thought that was just such a powerful way to sum up what's happening right now. And just seeing how moms have kept the world really running during this time and taking on all of these roles. It's just, taken what was already a culture of doing too much and trying to be too much, and it's just ramped it up to this unsustainable level. We saw with our research that women were really trying to, this is just such an inflection point. And women were really, as they realized that this was unsustainable, that they were getting burned out, the one of the silver linings is that it's been a time of redefinition and reinvention, a time of education and learning how to care for oneself in those small moments where possible. So I think there's just been such a swing and an emphasis on, learning more about what you need, how to get your needs met, really understanding what it takes to educate yourself on your own wellness. So, we're at this peak point of losing it. And now I think that we're seeing this kind of climb out. And I do hope that this is an opportunity for women to redefine some of the roles, to be able to delegate, to be able to not just say, here's one thing off of my ticker, but to say, like, this is one whole thing that somebody else simply needs to own. So that they can have the opportunity to experience self-actualization and to have, a life, right? So, I think society has set us up to want to be it all and do it all. And we're realizing we can't, and nor should we.
I'm going to jump in because the line that is running through my head is, please don't call me Supermom, which is a piece I wrote recently. And it was actually, I share a lot on LinkedIn about being a working mother. LinkedIn's an amazing community. And so people will comment. And somebody said, you're just an amazing supermom. And it sort of was like the straw that broke the camel's back, because I just had the scream in my head. I don't want to be a supermom. I want to take the cape off, the crown off, and just lie in a fetal position in bed for 2 days. And I think it's very easy to use that language of supermom because all of our systems are broken. Many of our systems are broken, as the pandemic has shown. Whether it's childcare or systemic bias women are facing at work, or being in a position to do it all, whatever that means. And I often ask myself, as amazing as my husband is, I don't hear anyone calling him super dad. And so I think that that is what concerns me the most a bit of coming out of all of this, is I think, to both of your points, women have done so much and gone above and beyond. Like it's not sustainable. And so to really level set what expectations are, and I think to level set Sheila, as you said, with yourself. And so for me, it's showing the kindness and grace that I would show to other people, to myself, which I don't think many of us do. As I said to a girlfriend recently, you would never talk about me that way, right? Think about that. The way we sometimes treat ourselves, or the doubt or the self-talk, you actually would not, most people wouldn't talk about someone else that way. So why can't we extend that same kindness and grace to ourselves? And so that's a journey for me, but that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, that's so true. We tend to be our hardest critics and push ourselves harder than anyone else would. I agree. We want to talk a little bit now about what employers can do and how they can respond to all of these things that are going on for women. What expectations should we have for employers? What expectations should they have for their working moms? Mita, let me have you take that first.
Well, like you said at the beginning, we're proud partners of Healthy Horizons. I wish I had Healthy Horizons when I was starting off breastfeeding my children and all of the challenges I faced at work. I think because we have been out of physical offices for so long. I joined CARTA 8 months ago. I've never stepped foot in an office. I don't know what our lactation rooms, mother's rooms look like. So I think first sort of level setting and asking people what they need. What are accommodations, right? For working mothers, that might be about nursing. As children are growing, one of the things that I'm also thinking about is the extreme separation anxiety children will have. I mean, we have been each other's best friends, frenemies, roommates, playmates, the four of us for 15 months now. And recently my husband, for the first time, went into the city to gather some things, and we prepared our 6-year-old. The massive tantrum and meltdown she had because her father left the house for the day, and not that we're in the same room altogether, but this comfort security blanket of knowing we're in one of these rooms talking on a laptop, that they can have access to us. So for employers to have some kindness and grace, if I'm showing up late, I'm not a performance issue, right? It's just that my family is adjusting to this new normal. And I know at CARTA, we'll be doing a hybrid approach starting September 7th, which we're really excited about. We also have the opportunity for employees to apply for remote positions and to apply for your role to be remote. And so I think you have to meet people where they are and ask working parents and working mothers in particular, what do they need?
Yeah, excellent suggestions. I think this is all uncharted territory for all of us. And so going forward, it is about, where are you? Are you burnt out? Do you need a break? Do you need support? Do you need to rearrange your schedule around childcare? All of those are just knowing that those questions exist and that those issues exist. So I appreciate you shedding all that light. Or what would you say employers can do to support their working moms and dads?
Yeah, first, I'm really glad Mita mentioned that, because we're experiencing that as well in our home, even when I go for a walk with our 6-year-old, waiting for me by the driveway when I get back, and having that anxiety. So really understanding that at reacclimation back to work and the result for the family, I think is important. And the check-ins also, as Mita said, are super important. During the pandemic, we heard that 80% of women said that they were burned out. They were experiencing, struggles at work. And a lot of them were really looking out of their workplace, trying to find more caring corporations. According to Lean In, only 31% of women said that their employers had checked in on them during the pandemic to see how things were going. And that was absolutely shocking to me. So I know our company does pulse surveys and kind of regular check-ins to see how people are doing. And I think that's great. And I think taking that to the next level and making sure that we are, or that companies are, like our company, looking at gender, looking at income level, looking at family structure, when they're reviewing those results, so that they can understand that, this is not one blanket uniform demographic. Women, there are different needs, different life stages. Some women are caring for aging parents, for example. And there's just a lot that our companies need to look at when it comes to caring. And it starts with listening. I mean, I'm a consumer insights professional, so it starts with listening and hearing and really understanding what's going on emotionally, and tactically as well. And then, we definitely have heard a lot about that flexibility and autonomy as well. People have really a strong desire now to work flexibly, to determine where and how they'll work. I know that won't always be, practical for every company, but really being able to adapt to that. We've found, on average, people have 46 extra minutes a day. That leads to, in some cases, the ability to work a little bit more, but in some cases, just the ability to manage lives a little bit better, throwing in that extra load of laundry, eating a healthier breakfast, right? Being able to go for that walk. And these things increase productivity and satisfaction at work. So, and then finally, I'll say, as it relates to caring, really encouraging women to take all of their vacation time. To take those moments when they need a wellness break, to listen to a podcast, to go for a walk. These are positive things that really improve the experience they have at work. And now that we've seen this full integration of work and home, that's going to be even more important over time.
Laura, I have to just say something. When you said take your vacation time, all of it, my mind just jumped to, I have so many new parents who would not take all the maternity leave that their companies offered them. And some of these packages were very, very generous and what we would consider ideal. And they were afraid to take the time because of a career advancement. Even though they know they could, they were afraid. And so I would encourage people to take every second of their maternity leave also, or their parental leave. As a public health background, you guys hit it right on the head. The first thing we do in public health is we do a needs assessment, and we talk to the population and we see what their needs are. We don't just create a program and just like plop it down and expect people to kind of fall in line and for it to work. We have to see where they are and meet them where they are. So that needs assessment, talking to the employees is really important, and then having them be part of the solution. Don't do the assessment and then come up with a solution. So I think that, especially in these changing times, we'll have a better outcome if we know what people really want and what they need. We can then create a situation that would be more beneficial for everybody. Vida, do you have anything to add to that piece?
No, I think nothing for me without me, right?
Right.
So I think you have to include your employees. They're often our forgotten consumer. We're constantly facing who we're selling to and why, but asking employees what they want and starting there. I also would just add, even with my own children, as we're thinking about mental health, children are going through a lot, especially as they've been socially isolated, having anxiety. I brought my kids to the Pittsburgh Zoo recently, and it was interesting, their reaction to crowds for the first time. Like, they were a little like, wow, there's a lot of people here. And I'm like, what? Wow. Like, just watching them back out in the world. And so I think, again, it goes back to showing kindness and grace for where people are in their journey, because I think a lot of parents, I think Sheila, you said it, there's a lot of unknown. And so whether it's my daughter having a tantrum before I'm trying to get out to work and I might be late, or maybe needing to take some time off because I need to be with her or help her seek some counseling and get some counseling.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Sheila, in the work that you do with Healthy Horizons, you're working with a lot of companies that are kind of like bringing their employees back into the workplace. What are you seeing with respect to the way that companies are changing their, in Healthy Horizons line of work is lactation rooms, but with the respect that with how they're handling employee-based programs like
we're
that?
seeing a lot. Yeah, we're seeing we have more requests for our educational offerings, whether it be pandemic coaching, stress, the yoga, stuff that we didn't really have an interest in before, because I think they want to offer their employees just a wider range. Even like the sleep consulting has been a big thing that people, because they want to figure out ways to maybe make certain parts of people's lives better. So we're seeing a lot of that, where they're willing to spend more on these educational programs because they're looking at what their employees are telling them and what the weaknesses are, I guess, and what their offerings were before. A lot of stuff on mental health, what we're hearing. So the more that we could offer that to people, because I think there's a shortage out there of therapists and access to a lot of this now. So we're finding that. We're also finding that they're asking us to be more things around lactation support, like we're doing in-home, like lactation bundles, where people can have what they may have got at work at home to support them with their breastfeeding at home, whether it's with a pump or bra pads or goodies. So we're seeing companies kind of look that way. We haven't seen that before. So I think that's good, looking at new ways to support as people transition back and stay at home.
That's good. Well, this has been such a really, really good conversation. We didn't have any questions from our live listeners. We might get some after the fact, but we had a lot of comments about, what you ladies have shared being really resonant with what women are experiencing, or the attendees and viewers on our call today. So this has been super helpful, and really appreciate you taking the time out of life and work to bring this content to our listeners. I'm going to ask one more question before we close of each of you, and maybe that's just to share your one word of hope and inspiration for listeners, so that we can go out into the world feeling refreshed.
I'll jump in by just saying the one thing I'm trying to focus on is paying it forward. So if there are women who are trying to get back into work, if someone reaches out to you on LinkedIn, I know we're all really busy, but try to take a call, try to help forward a resume along, try to help make a connection, introductions. I think that's what we have to be doing for each other.
I agree. Or Sheila, anything you guys would close with?
Personally, what comes to my mind is learning how to surrender to, and to let go of some of those have-tos.
Yeah. Wise words.
Yeah. I mean, and I think just, this, I do see a silver lining in this inflection point of, reassessing life right now, understanding what brings you joy during this time. And so, my thing is just trying to choose one of those things each day, taking a quick walk, just taking a minute to myself, learning something new, these things that really carry me forward. I think this has really offered that opportunity to understand a little bit more about what I need. And I encourage everybody to do the same.
Oh, this is so wonderful. I can't thank you three enough for spending this 45 minutes with us and sharing your insights that you've gathered and the wisdom that you have with our group and with me. I've learned so much from hearing you speak. And for our listeners online, thanks for spending the time with us. Thank you for the comments and the wonderful feedback and participation. We've really enjoyed having this time with you, and we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.